Hi, Bailey.
Hi.
Hi. So I was just saying to the others, this is kind of just a really informal thing. We're going to go around and talk about anything we're excited and interested in. And I was just reflecting on some of the things from last year's announcement. Well, I should say, if you want to, you're welcome to turn your camera on or just leave it off if you don't want to appear. We're going to record it and put the video up for students later if anyone wants to watch it, and past students of the unit if they care to. So yeah, I was looking at the stuff from last year that we talked about and kind of reflecting on it and thinking it's always interesting when I see Apple's announcements to try and work out what's going
The
to
thought
make a real.
process.
Well,
Really? Or-
well, look, the thought process is interesting because, everything that they do is marketing names. Every feature has a distinct marketing name, and they're very much use particular language when they announce things. But I always think it's
Yeah.
interesting to work out what has the most impact and what is kind of likely to have the most impact. So that would be an interesting question for either of you and any of the students that want to pitch in on it. So maybe have a think about that for a moment. But like last year, I think one of the things that excited me most, I mean, they pushed a lot of sort of sharing features, and some of those I've used a little, but it's more just been the things that happen automatically, like I don't know, a photo that appears somewhere because someone shared it in a conversation or something like that. But I think the live text within photos has kind of made a big impact for me. I've certainly having that kind of machine learning built in and being able to extract text from images, and then I guess having some of that be searchable is pretty impactful, and it seems to work really well, right? It's something that just for the most part it works, and you use it and you don't think about it. And I think often Apple's features work best when that happens. I think my other reflection is just I was kind of interested but a bit wary of the concurrency features that were added to Swift, and now I've used them and used them a fair amount. I think they're great.
Yeah, I love the concurrency features so much.
Yeah.
Writing code with this async await style is so much easier and better than the previous approach we had of kind of chaining completion handlers. So, and they're
Feels clean.
It's clean, and that's gone a bit further this year. So they were the things I think had the most impact on me from last year. I don't know if Josh, do you remember any of the stuff we talked about last year and anything that stood out for you that has made a difference for
Honestly, the concurrency
iOS
is the big
15?
one. Like I remember, particularly last year, looking at the concurrency and just going, "This could be very useful," and then starting to implement it in the labs and just going, "Crap, this is extremely useful. This is so much nicer."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. No, I 100% agree. I think the concurrency stuff was probably like it's probably not something I would have had too much forethought when it was first announced, but I think after now having used it, 100%
It just
best
makes
feature for
code
me.
so much more readable.
Yeah. I'm so happy with it.
Yeah, and I think much more readable, just understandable, maintainable, readable, all of those things. Yeah. Okay, cool. So for Joel, who just joined us as well, this is really informal. If anyone wants to ask any questions and throw their microphone on and or if anyone wants to share the things they're most excited about, we're going to go around and do that with the three of us, but the students that are here too, if you want to chime in and say about anything you're excited about and want to get our opinions on. So from the announcements this year, do you have a kind of highlight, Jason? Is there something that you're excited about or kind of think either on the development side or feature side that you're really...
I think both excited and nervous about would probably definitely be the M2.
The M2?
Because I'm excited to sort of see how much better the performance is on it. I'm excited to actually see like the improvements it actually creates and all that kind of stuff. Little bit scared if there's going to be any sort of similar issues that we sort of experienced with the M1, or if they've been able to iron out those bugs. But I think for me personally, that that M2 chip, I'm just sort of curious on how good the performance is going to be. I don't think that's as much a developer thing rather than just a usability thing.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's probably the first standout thing for me.
Are you
Yeah.
using an M1 at the moment
No,
at
I'm
all?
not. No.
No.
Have you had a
No.
chance to play with one and use it
I
for development?
have had a
Okay.
chance to play with an M1, yeah, but I don't personally own one at the moment. It's actually could be something I get soon.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
Don't do it. It's a trap.
But
Not for our
no,
work, Jason.
no. That's why I'm also sort of wondering, like, the M2's around the corner, so do I just hold out for that? Yeah.
I think probably you do. I think you're likely to have less of the teething issues we got with the M1 just because of the real kind of architecture change that of switching from Intel to that.
Yeah.
Josh, you've been actively using an M1 for development, right?
Yes, that's
And
correct. So my work laptop's an M1.
And what's your just gut reaction to using that over an Intel Mac?
Oh, over an Intel Mac, league's better.
Yeah, and that's my experience too, Jason.
Yeah.
The development time of compiling big projects is so much faster. I think as well, maybe we talk about it a bit today. Some of the things they talked about in terms of the compiler tool chain for this year is about optimizing linking and also about the way they order and process parallel tasks in compilation. I think that a lot of that is towards the processor architecture that we have with the M1 chips and making the most out of those for development. So I think all of these things kind of bode well for the speed of actually compiling projects.
Mm.
Yeah.
That was the biggest complaint that I had for my Intel Mac, and the reason why I ended up asking work for a new laptop was just because even a simple project like working on week 2 or 3, I'd hit compile and it'd still take like 3 or 4 minutes.
Yeah.
Granted, I think there was also something wrong with my MacBook, but that's a separate issue entirely.
Did you have a standout feature or something you're really excited about, Josh, from this year?
Not off the top of my head, no.
Okay. How about the students here? Did anyone have anything that they got really excited about? And yeah, makes them want to either install a beta of Xcode or try out iOS 16.
Particularly from Bailey. Yeah.
I like the new lock screen.
Like the new lock
Yeah.
screen. Yeah, new lock screen is interesting. So for those that don't, I guess there's a few things that were announced for the lock screen. One is styling differences in terms of the text. So it looks immediately obviously different. We had widgets as an announcement. We had some different ways that notifications would be displayed. And I think the other thing was what customization for different focuses. So if you've got like a work mode and a home mode and do not disturb mode, having kind of different screens and stuff like that. So was there one of those things in particular that excites you, Tony, or you just like the idea of things looking different and having some
It's just
customization?
looks great and customization and the features, different features you can like. There's also emoji wallpaper and
Emoji wallpaper. That's cool.
yeah, probably the widget gonna use like for always on display, maybe probably iOS iPhone 14 probably.
Right. Yeah, and look, this is always an interesting game and that you play and we talk about, like Josh and Jason and I, is working out where Apple are going, because often the features that they announce are early indications of potential hardware, which you've kind of identified there, Tony, that maybe we end up with an always on screen like we have on the watch for iOS devices. And yeah, sometimes you can predict based on the features they announce where they're going, kind of like looking to, and as developers, we have to kind of work out where the puck is going, to use a hockey term, and therefore react accordingly. And I mean, that's very much what we've been doing with things like Swift UI, is working out how much Apple are embracing it and pushing it. You know, if you looked at their WWDC slides a few years ago, you would have seen Objective-C and Swift side by side, and at some point, you know, they switched to being Swift only, and now they're talking about live previews and Swift UI and Swift really being the core of their development technologies. I'm so absolutely distracted by what Josh is doing. Are you unpacking a drum kit or something?
No, I think it's a new
My
setup.
apologies. I'll turn my camera. It's a fill light.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay, cool. You can leave the camera on. It's fine.
That's it.
It's just like I thought this was
A
like
bit
show and
distracting.
tell, and you brought
No,
some
no.
like visual props along.
No.
No. Yeah,
I forgot
but no,
that
I was
I've
gonna
got
say,
Yeah, sorry,
yeah,
continue.
oh, no, it's all good. I was gonna say, based on what Mitch said as well, yeah, I haven't actually seen the desk view, but the CarPlay direction, and I think just the integration between the watch, you know, your cars, and the fitness related stuff that they sort of announced, this external technologies connectivity, I guess, is sort of like a big thing that they've sort of brought out in this one.
Oh, for sure. I mean, CarPlay, I have a car with CarPlay. At first it didn't support it, and then thankfully the car audio AV system got a software upgrade at some point. It supported Android auto initially. And CarPlay's great. Like being able to just ask Siri to do things while you're driving and having all of the sort of app features and having it improve over time is fabulous. I mean, it's only recently, I think this year, that we got speed limits within maps on CarPlay in Australia. And I think actually that's been a really big thing for me. I was waiting for that because it had arrived overseas and hadn't arrived here. But the CarPlay stuff this year is pretty crazy because it's mostly not changes to CarPlay itself. It's sort of the future of what connected vehicles might be like. And they're talking about, you know, cars where they've got, what would you say, like door-to-door displays across the whole dash, and how you can utilize that for the sort of panel that you would usually have for your odometer and speedometer and all that kind of controls, plus the controls for the car.
Yeah.
And
being
it's
able to customize that as well.
yeah, and exactly, and give it sort of a personality or style. It's a really cool idea. It's really interesting to see how well it is embraced, I guess, by the car companies and how long it takes. That's the big unknown for me in the CarPlay stuff.
But I think with the big push of EVs, like
yeah, that's going to make a huge difference as well.
Yeah, and if they've got the backing of, you know, mobile phone technologies or things like that, like Apple pushing EV manufacturers to sort of consider this implementation of what they want to have, you know, be able to edit and customize your dashboard or anything else like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe there could be like some cool stuff going on behind the scenes.
Yeah, absolutely. What were you going to say, Josh?
I'm very much so. I love CarPlay. It's one of the features I use. And it was actually when I bought my new car a couple of years ago. CarPlay support and, well, I had an Android device at that point, so both was one of the things I looked for. I will admit, though, I'm very much... I like the entertainment system. I am always apprehensive about CarPlay and those sorts of technology starting to take over more and more, because there's so many horror stories of when there's glitches.
And you just mean like you appreciate having physical controls in a car that turn your heater on, because if it's controlled by your phone and you can't make it work at some point,
not even necessarily like heater. I'm talking stuff like acceleration and all that onboard computers.
Okay.
Because a lot of the integration for these sorts of things, there's not a good layer of security between the two.
Yeah. I'm hopeful because it's Apple, the way it'll work will be secure, but
yes.
You know, you won't allow an app to adjust your speed on your behalf or something.
Oh, definitely not.
I could imagine happening on Android, you know.
Yeah, but I guess that's the other thing is like, if you're able to customize your dashboard and control like what can actually be shown on the screen, if there's a glitch and all of a sudden you can't see your speed anymore, like
Yeah.
what's happening, you know, whether it affects other parts of the car or anything else like that. It could just be really, really nasty, and it could set them up for some possible suing instances if, you know, it
Yep.
ends up causing major issues within vehicles. It's something that, yeah, I think Apple's going to have to be careful with, and sort of, I think even just governments as well. Like, you know, what happens if there is a serious accident and it was Apple that caused it?
Yeah, I totally agree, Jason. I guess I imagine how this will have to work is that any car with these kind of software displays for things will have to have its own form of controls. And then if the phone disconnects, hey Siri reverse, I just said Mitch's comment. Yeah. And meanwhile, you're trying to, you know, do something else, and it takes it to mean what the car's doing. Like Siri.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. And I imagine if it disconnects, it has to fall back to that as a sort of backup.
Yeah, by default, which there probably would be, because yeah, not everyone would have an iPhone that may have these kinds of cars or anything else like that. So they'd have to take that into consideration.
It is interesting though, when these kind of things drive consumer purchasing. I mean, like what Josh was just saying, if I bought a car now, I absolutely wouldn't buy one without CarPlay, having experienced it. And from what Josh was just saying, you know, they made the decision about this too. And that's really interesting, where at some point automotive makers kind of get forced into this because there's a large segment of the population that expect or want those features.
Yeah. You know, like it's kind of weird the phone development company is basically, or I guess computer phone is driving what the car industry is doing. It's
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, Mitch, the other thing you mentioned was desk view. Are you talking about I can't remember what the name of the feature is, but using the phone clip to the top of your camera as a sort of display that can then do features like center stage, but also view the desk of the person working? Is that what it was that you were talking about? Yeah, I mean, I think that as well is a sort of sneaky thing that might have a big impact, because especially if we're talking about, you know, continuation or future pandemics or things where we switch to working at home modes for things, or even just remote work, because a large portion of the population is now pretty actively working remotely for some part of, you know, their work week.
like for a lot of industries, especially development and programming and things like that, it's quite easy to work from home.
Yeah,
well, I was going to say, like, Michael and I work from home as well some days. So
yeah, so I'm at home right now. And you know, a lot of the academics, if they're not teaching, couldn't be on campus 3 days a week and at home a couple of days. But yeah, this feature was basically being able to see someone's desk. So if, you know, maybe they're drawing or drafting something, or they're a teacher and they want to show an activity they're doing, then it's visible to the students. I think that is quite compelling. So yeah, I agree, Mitch. That is an interesting feature.
Yeah,
and that might have quite an impact on people.
Yeah, I'm just sort of thinking like make a lab. That'd be fantastic to be able to like show making something physically while doing a talk or something like that.
I mean, yeah, I guess, yeah, it's a good thing for those that don't already have the gear, because like some of us have gone and bought gear specifically for that, but it makes it far more accessible for everyone else, which is fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. And also, I'm guessing your gear is fairly, I don't know, complicated or time consuming to set up and use, and you know, it's additional bits of hardware.
In previous semesters, no, but given that I have to, so I went and purchased a bunch of other stuff because I've got to live stream my sister's wedding, so I actually have a proper professional camera now as well.
Yeah.
Excellent. So when we need
like,
live streaming support, we'll be coming to you, Josh.
Yep,
yeah, for sure. I was gonna say, yeah, but like, even if you just considered like the ability that the camera can have within an iPhone itself, and even some of the apps and features that you could do, you know, like using Snapchat or filters or anything else like that, having that in a computer-based system rather than just a phone-based system could be quite useful as well. You know, quickly
you're burying the lead as well.
Yeah.
Photogrammetry.
True.
Yeah, because the new phones have LiDAR and all this sort of stuff on them, so there's a lot more they can do with those cameras.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's a
And
good
it
point.
makes me wonder that, having, like, I'd have to have a look into what the connectivity is like, but if you've got the processing power of a computer and the camera within a phone, that's, that can do LiDAR and all that kind of stuff. That's pretty good.
Yeah, absolutely. For students as well, like this doesn't have to be just a conversation between Josh and Jason and I. So if any of you want to chime in and add comments or have any other thoughts, feel free to add them.
Yeah, I was going to say, you're done. We're not your teachers anymore. You don't have to treat it as such.
Exactly. Results have been submitted. You've got them. The unit is finished. I think my feature I'm most, well, two things. No, actually, one thing that I think might be really significant is passkeys. This it's not a developer feature, but it's so do you know what I'm talking about with passkeys? Passkeys is Apple talking about how they're going to rethink passwords. So I mean, look, I use a password manager. I get it to generate unique passwords for every account I have and store them in a password manager that you remember a single complicated password for. And it's got integrations with Safari on iOS and the Mac and things, but I have to trust it, that piece of software, to do a good job. And there's still potential issues with that. It's not the tightest integration it could have, and I've suggested this kind of thing to family members, but a lot of my family members and extended friends that I help and do computer support for, they all reuse passwords. And I think the whole thing is pretty house of cards, scary and unstable.
Yeah.
I haven't, touch wood, I don't think any of them have had an account compromised, but I think it's a matter of time before someone does.
Yeah.
The passkey stuff is really forcing that to work. I mean, if you think that often our phones are now being used as a two-factor authentication device, it's almost not alleviating, but getting rid of passwords in favor of using your phone as the sign-in device. Like there's a sort of implicit assumption that you carry your device with you. It goes where you go, and it can be used in this way to authenticate you. So I mean, how this stuff works is that they they basically generate a unique password for every account, except that it's not really a unique password. It's actually a public key of a public key, private key cryptography pair. So what that means is even if someone found that public key, because their website was compromised or something, it wouldn't be a big deal. And then it uses your phone to kind of validate that and check whether you're signing in. You can even do cool things like I could, let's say I went for a meeting with Josh, and Josh has their computer there and they need me to sign into an account to check something. I can just type my username, or they can type my username in, and then there'll be a button that says, use phone to authenticate. And because, their browser won't know my password. So then we do that, and I get a notification on the phone and sign in by the phone. I say, yes, I'm authorizing this, and you can sign in. So there's a bunch of nice kind of integrations with that. And it's always tricky to tell whether this stuff will get adopted. I mean, like the sign in with Apple stuff had some nice features, but it also has some problems. Like I'm not really sure. I've created some accounts with sign in with Apple and some I haven't, and I'm never sure which sites I've actually used it for. And because I use a password manager, I don't always use Safari. There's issues there. And I don't have a sense with pass keys how well it will be adopted. But if people do adopt it, I think it has a really beneficial impact, in the sense that lots of people might stop using passwords. And it's an open standard. So it's got all of the webhooks and things, so it can be used on websites and everywhere else. And I guess there shouldn't be a reason that Google can't adopt it. Or in fact, Google might even be part of, it might be one of these conglomerate efforts where Apple and Google are already involved. I'm not certain of that, but I would hope that Android will have the capability to use this, even if it's under a different name or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Usually you would imagine they would. Yeah.
Yeah. Did either of you have any thoughts on that?
I'd be interested if it's a standard, because I make heavy use of the password manager now at the moment.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm very much the same.
And Josh, are you having to use it between Android and iOS and Windows and Mac frequently as well? So because you're working basically on all platforms, right?
I don't use Android anymore, thank goodness. I managed to ditch that one for totally iOS.
Okay.
But yeah, it's I'd need some, like, if they were going to do something like that, it'd need to be cross-platform for me to be able to use it.
Yeah.
That's fair.
Yeah, and this is what I always wonder as well, is like some of these things are likely to have a big impact. I mean, it's funny, isn't it? They announced at a WWDC years ago that FaceTime was going to be an open standard and they would publish it and everyone could use it. And I think Steve Jobs or someone else pulled back on that promise and didn't do it. And it makes me wonder, would Zoom and things like that have had the popularity they've had if FaceTime had been made an open standard at that time? I don't know.
Yeah, the timing wasn't great, was it?
No.
Yeah, I guess with the passkey stuff, my concern would be like, what would the security be if you were to lose your device or anything else like that? Like, I know there's already some fairly stock standard security of being able to track your phone or turn it off remotely or things like that, but how much would that actually affect it? You know, if, for example, someone was able to get into your phone and you didn't realize, how much damage could they do by using the passkey thing compared to a password manager or some other kind of system?
Yeah. I think that's a really valid point. And I mean, I still have a 4-digit unlock code on my phone, and that's pretty easy for, if I was using it frequently to unlock it, pretty easy for someone looking over your shoulder to get and then somehow take your phone off you. It does make you think that we should be treating that much more securely the more and more power it has, and they do, right? Because we've got I mean, can't remember what the marketing term for all of the Apple Pay stuff is. Maybe it's called Apple Pay. And they're talking about lots of hotel and transit passes and things being used in just from the phone. So our phones do have more and more capabilities, but they, as you say, Jason, have more and more risk associated with them if they were to become compromised. That's a really good point. Yeah, Bailey said I much prefer it to remembering passwords. I mean, I do too, absolutely. You've said, Josh, I love my password manager, especially when I need to log into my phone. Use my phone's authenticator, then log into my email. Yeah.
I just can't. I use LastPass, and I love it, but that's the only thing that just annoys me. Is if I need to use it on my phone, sometimes I need to log back in. But to do that, I then need to use my authenticator, which is also on my phone. And then when I enter it, it's like, oh, you need to check your email and click this link. And then oftentimes when it breaks, which it does sometimes, I then need to log in again and use my SSO again before it'll actually let me into the app. She's like, I appreciate the security, but calm down.
And at some point, you're going to find yourself in a situation where you don't have one device that you are able to get into, and you'll be blocked from everything because you can't check your email or you can't.
Yeah. Imagine if you were trying to get into your emails. That was the thing that was the app you were trying to use.
So the two things that I use. So I use auto-generated passwords for most things. The two things that I don't use auto-generated passwords for, which are both different, is my email login and my LastPass login. Both of those have passwords that I've remembered. So, yeah.
Yeah, probably not a bad idea. Yeah, I think having a secondary backup sort of system is useful. But yeah, security's always been a big concern. Especially, as we were saying before, like devices get more and more powerful in what they can do and what they control.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of wild. Yeah. Other
Sure.
than that, I don't know, was there anything else that caught your eye, Michael, or?
I think there's some nice things in terms of the developer features, like simple things, and things that have bitten students. So like they said in one of the sessions that there's kind of constant recompilation happening behind the scenes in Xcode. And we see that, right? Because like you can be typing something and then the error messages will change. And one of the things they're doing in Xcode, is it 13? Can't remember what are we up to now? No, 13. We must be Xcode 14. In Xcode 14, it's really simple, but they'll gray out error messages while they're recompiling to let you know which ones are new and which ones are out of date. And because there's some sort of lag time between when this happens, and something like that actually is kind of exciting to me because I think it will help students. Like I've plenty of times this semester in consultations been helping students and they're looking at like an out of date error message from something that hasn't fully recompiled yet. So things like that. There's some kind of nice things in terms of code navigation. So it's sort of, how table views work on iOS when they're not in grouped mode, where it always sort of just pins the current section heading to the top. It's going to start doing that in Xcode with method or function names, so you can quickly tell, where you are in the code. So there's some nice little things in Xcode, and then like we talked about before, some of the improved compilation and linking. I don't know, that stuff always excites me because if it becomes much faster, then I think that really helps the general usability of Xcode.
Yeah, definitely improving that would be.
And that was all to buy me time, Jason, because I didn't really have anything obvious that I was excited about. But I've just thought what one of them is, and that's did you see this stuff about regex literals in Swift?
No, I didn't. What's that
No.
about?
Okay, so also for the students, let's say you have something like I don't know, comma separated value file, and like you've got a string that's got a bunch of things, or even like, let's say a string containing a name, and you've got someone's first name and their last name and a student ID, right? And the student ID is numeric and the names are alphabetical and mixed case or something like that. Then you can write a regular expression, basically a pattern that matches it, but you can put inside this regular expression indicators to say there's things of interest that I want to pull out of it. And then you can run these regexes over a string and end up with variables from the parts you've matched. And it's a really nice way of passing a string, because breaking strings apart in Swift and doing things with them, manipulating them, is not super nice, other than doing something like checking a prefix or extracting a prefix or something very simple. So I'm excited about that. Also because the regexes are part of the Swift language, which means they're recognized and checked by the compiler. Their syntax highlighted. It's not like you're just putting the regex inside a string, which you do in lots of other languages, not all languages, but some, and then they don't get checked, and it's only at compile time you find out you've got a syntax error in your regex. So that's quite nice. I'm excited about that. And also, I mean, because of my Magic apps, there's a bunch of code that I have, some of it in Swift, that does parsing of various documents and different sources that I use to extract and build databases. So I think that's something I'll probably use for that side project a lot, and it's kind of exciting. And the other part of it that's kind of cool is you can write the regexes, but then you can also write them in code as well as in standard regular expression syntax. And what that means is you can even do it with a mixture of things. So you can write part of it that might be how you match a word, which would be a really simple regex that pretty much anyone could read. but then you could sort of embed that within a tree of software written regex components, if that makes sense. So you can sort of write the code in the most readable format, because one of the things about regex is if you know them well, they're quite readable, and if they become very complicated, or you don't know them well, they're super hard to understand. Like, I don't know if the students among, you can put up your hand or something. Have you ever seen what the regex to match an email address is? For example, like often you need to do error checking to see if an email address is valid. And like, there's probably well-known regex to match a email address. Let me see if I can find one. 2 seconds.
Abandon your post! Flee for your life!
Whoa, I'm just reading a Stack Overflow post with 3,000 likes where someone's talking about making it fully RFC 822 compliant regex and efficiency. This is very overkill, but like, okay, I'm not even checking this, but I'm just going to paste it into the chat so you can see what a really complicated regex might look like, and then you'd go, how would I ever read something like this?
Yeah.
Right. And there's bits of it that are kind of easy to understand. Like, here's the at, right? Like, that is literally the at symbol. And then some of these, oh, you can't see because I'm highlighting it, but
Yeah.
a part of it, like this part, is very easy to understand. This is basically saying that this is, well, okay, I should have put the star after it, but like, let's say we have this. This is saying 0 or more characters where any of those characters can be either a range A to Z, lowercase, the numeric values 0 to 9, or the dash. So that's what can be the character kind of directly following the at symbol. So, I mean, you can see how simple regex is, easy to understand, and you could imagine something matching a word. You'd want to just read it as a string or a literal, but then when it gets super complicated at some point, it's not worth writing it like that, because debugging it is basically impossible because you can't understand the structure anymore. So yeah, that's super nerdy, but that's something I'm excited about, Jason.
Yeah, no, that is pretty cool. That is pretty cool. I was going to say one thing I'm actually surprised I didn't see much more of was Swift UI. I saw they had some courses and things like that that were sort of going on at the time, but I was surprised there wasn't any like bigger announcements or even just any general announcements to sort of like push it a bit more.
So that's a good point. I was watching that. I don't know that I agree that there wasn't anything, but I think you're right. It wasn't as wasn't such a big deal made of it as previous years. And I think that's because they probably have a fair amount of acceptance of Swift UI. Definitely, like we were talking about before, of this predicting where they're going. I felt like they were pushing the technologies that they want people to be using as Swift UI and live previews. You know, if you listen to or talk to people that are doing iOS development, there's still gaps between what Swift UI is capable of and what what UIKit, UIKit based apps are capable of. And that gap has narrowed this year. I think a lot of the announcements, Jason, were little things like filling in missing pieces and coping with navigation, coping with share sheets and other sheets that weren't well supported in Swift UI. So, you know, dealing with, I think they have a grid layout, a custom layout. So that sort of stuff's there. I think also some of the things they announced for Swift UI was better incremental adoption. So using bits of Swift UI in a UIKit app and vice versa. So I think that might be one of the things that prompts us to do a bit more Swift UI. So I'm at this point, and we haven't fully made the decision yet for what we'll teach students in 2022. My feeling is there'll be more Swift UI, enough that you can understand and use the basics of it to create a view or create table view cells or something like that, but we won't fully switch to it. Because it still seems problematic. I don't know, do you, either you, Jason, or Josh, do you have any kind of further views or thoughts on that?
Well, I think that's sort of the thought process for me sort of bringing it up was I feel like it sounds as though Apple's getting more comfortable with where Swift UI is, and it's more of bit more of like a patching job and making sure it's, you know, fixing any, you know, issues or, you know, any sort of major flaws that are currently still within the system. But I would have thought they would have tried to expand upon it and take it beyond what UIKit can do and completely replace UIKit. Whereas because I feel like this year they've slowed down with the Swift UI, is it actually going to fully replace it, or is it something we're going to use alongside UIKit?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think that Apple are pretty good at supporting technologies for a long time. And I hope that's the case because I've still got a large amount of my personal apps code base is in Objective-C. So if it'll be a nightmare to rewrite that.
Yep.
It's an interesting question, Jason. I think that parts of, what would I say? I'd say, I think the design of certain things are trending in a Swift UI direction. And what I mean by that is this idea of composable pieces where, you know, you create an object and call a method on it and returns itself. So you can kind of chain property modifiers and all this kind of stuff. That approach is, if you have a look at the regex code base stuff I talked about, that's very Swift UI compositional style, as is the compositional layout that we taught in the unit for using with collection views. Similarly, there was a charts API that is new this year that allows you to do native charts both on iOS and macOS. And that's Swift UI style. As far as I know, I haven't tried it. I think you can use it from Swift still, but you're having to write Swift UI like code. So I think it's sort of permeating the new features and design choices. Oh, and the other thing is all of the widget stuff we talked about, like you know, Mitch was saying with the home screen stuff, all of the widgets and complications on the watch are now Swift UI based. So there's places where you kind of have to use it. And look, I think what my view of it is that's Apple saying storyboards and constraints are probably not the future of UI layout, especially across multiple platforms where we're coping with displaying things in various places and sizes on watches and cars and phones and iPads and Macs and whatever. And Swift UI could be, and I think that's one of the draws of it, right, is that a lot of it is designed to work in different places and have sort of sensible defaults in those places.
Yeah, I feel like this sort of sense of modularity is really coming into place where, you know, you can actually maybe even chop and change it and use it on different screens or, you know, sources or technologies or things like that. Which, yeah, I think Swift UI 100% is going to be used for that kind of stuff. It's, yeah. So I'm just surprised that there's still that minor connection to UIKit still there compared to a complete phase out like they did with Objective-C. Yeah, they just pushed it essentially nearly out of existence compared to Swift.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did you have any thoughts or anything else you want to add, Josh?
No, sorry, I'm just dealing with something else at the moment.
Nah, no worries, that's fine. And Bailey said UIKit had so many useful features that they wouldn't want to use it for, or they wouldn't want to use just one or the other. Yeah, I agree with that. I mean, it seems like Swift UI has certain strengths, and it's pretty clear where those strengths are. It also has some weaknesses, and some of those weaknesses are coverage of existing APIs, and some of them are about, you know, we might have touched on before, like error messages and stuff like that makes code kind of hard to debug. Oh, and obviously all of the like data binding stuff is great. Like not having to manually ensure the state of something matches and is kept up to date is a huge win for writing that kind of code, and potentially reduces a lot of code. So it'll be interesting to see where it goes for sure. Yeah, what else did I have on my list here that we've covered for developer stuff? It's kind of interesting that they're pushing and supporting Xcode Cloud a little bit more, which is kind of the Apple's solution for continuous integration, continuous development stuff, which is somewhere that the industry in general is more and more using. And I think it was a kind of shortfall or failing of Apple's technologies that there wasn't, at least to my knowledge, great integration of these kind of processes in their tool chain. So I think that's really addressing that. But I also don't know enough to speak on it authoritatively. I haven't played with or used it, but I do know it is free for paid Apple developers for like the next 18 months. So, I mean, I guess that's to get people hooked, and then I think they're offering it pretty low cost. And I guess the benefit is if you can run and test your app on a bunch of different devices and don't have to own them, that's pretty great. In the past, I've had a few different iOS devices for testing, and being able to run a bunch of stuff in the cloud and see screenshots or videos or whatever else of it performing on those devices without owning them is kind of compelling as well.
I think it'll definitely improve the development process anyway.
Yeah,
Especially for like smaller indie company developers and things that probably can't afford to get, every single device on the market to test their stuff on.
Yeah, totally. We talked a little bit about Swift charts, which is interesting to me because I wanted to use some chart stuff in my apps and I haven't ever done that. But I also, the way that you actually specify things is all this kind of declarative style, and I have to go and get my head around it. I'm not used to writing code in that way, especially like describing charts in that way. So that will be a fun or potentially frustrating thing to look at. What were you going to say?
Yep.
Sorry, Jason.
I was going to mention more about the iPad 6 and its like external display support and things like that as well. But I was going to say, in regards to the chart thing, I'd be curious if it's worth looking into doing like supplementaries or things next year for that kind of stuff, because I think a lot of students probably do actually try to use charts for their assignments. It's charts or ways of displaying information is really important in a lot of apps, and maybe it's something that we consider looking into as well.
Yes, I totally agree. And I think the basics of the chart API are not complicated. So yes, I think we should probably, maybe we should commit to it now. We should have a a supplementary on using the charts, because we do know that, I mean, we've been recommending a couple of third-party libraries for charting. I know that I'd certainly seen a number of students that have used them over the past few years.
Yeah, and this is the thing, like in the past, yeah, like students have had to jump to like GitHub or something and find some chart library and integrate that into their app. But if it's actually something that iOS has inbuilt that we can utilize a bit better than these other chart systems, it's probably worth using.
Yeah. And other things that students have used that are kind of interesting that were announced this year. There are REST APIs for WeatherKit. So Apple bought Dark Sky, I think, was the API.
That
was
right.
Yeah, which was an open API for weather data. And they've used that to create their own weather API. So there's both a Swift API, but also a web-based REST API. So, and also there are REST APIs for maps. They said for geocoding and reverse geocoding, as in like translating a lat long into an address and translating an address into a lat long, and for searching and for ETA So I think that's interesting because they're often things that students use Google Maps for. But I do worry that it might be one of these situations where you need a paid developer account to access them. So we kind of, I guess, need to check that out and cross our fingers and hope that they're kind of open APIs. And also, I guess there is a question, if there's a Swift API with WeatherKit, then people can just use that directly. So it's sort of, while we want students to gain the ability to use web APIs from their app, it also is not great if we're forcing them to do that when there's an existing native Swift API. So it's a bit contrived.
Yeah, but this is also the reason why, though, we don't do weather APIs, generally speaking, because they tend to be fairly straightforward.
Trivial.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's my stuff I had on the developer list of new things. I guess there are a couple of other minor things like ability to use from our apps, camera views with live text and data scanners like QR codes and stuff. So that makes it easier to be able to do certain things. I mean, I think there's a number of students that have done vision related things of trying to extract text for receipts or other documents out of static camera images. So if this is part of the APIs, that will be an interesting thing. I don't know if it's common enough that we would cover it directly in the unit, but kind of good to know about and generally gain some awareness over. And I'm sure someone in the teaching team will probably have experience with that in future. Did Tony and Bailey and Mitch, did any of you have any questions about things you wanted to ask, or even just features of iOS 16 or macOS Ventura that you were interested or excited to talk about or wanted to ask us anything about? Mostly covered now.
Yeah.
So I had some notes I jotted down about iOS and Ventura that we could have a look at. We didn't talk about. I think one of the things I was excited about from both iOS and macOS was shared photo libraries. I mean, there have been shared albums in the past on iOS, but they use lower quality images and they're not kind of the same. So what they announced this year was the ability to really have shared photos that are owned by multiple people, and hopefully that means I could share these with my parents or my brother and his family and have an album like that. Yeah, no worries, Josh.
Yeah, that makes sense. Like having the interconnectivity between certain things. I'm sort of also curious, like if you're sharing albums and photo libraries and things like that, sort of thinking about like the influencer sort of like space in the world, like being able to easily share that between editors and everyone else to be able to get marketing done or anything else. I wonder how that could even possibly work out.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So I think they've said that or I think you can probably even try it on the beta, that there's editing features, though maybe there's sort of like someone who's the administrator so that you can't, maybe you can't delete things, so that someone could accidentally delete photos from someone else's album. But I think you can the editing is done, and I think they preserve the original. So you could imagine it being used within a workflow where you're sharing it with someone else. I mean, sometimes Apple don't do the best job on these sharing sort of features. In the past, they've had sharing, but it's been limited to family groups, which are quite restrictive. They're like 5 or 6 people or something, which means that if you can try and make it work for a work setting, but often that just isn't possible because of some limitation. So I do think that would be an interesting thing to see, Jason, for sure. Bailey said in the chat, should we be learning Swift UI in the future? If you're planning to be an iOS developer, I think the answer is yes. And I count myself among the people that needs to learn it better. I mean, I have some basic understanding of it, but as I said before, Bailey, I think because we kind of see the writing on the wall. A lot of the new things that they're designing in Swift UI like ways. And I think that will be the future. I think on the other hand, if you ignored it for a while, I think you'd be fine. Like you could totally find work as a UI kit app developer. As I'm saying this, I'm kind of wondering, I can't remember, is we have UI kit is the iOS one, and yeah, Mac's the app kit one. Yeah.
UI kit's iOS and app kit is macOS.
Thank you.
That's fun.
UI kit. So I think the answer is yes, you should be learning it for sure at some point, but could you avoid learning it for a while? Swift UI? Yeah, for sure, because UI kit isn't going away and the technologies there are going to be supported for some time. And even now, like where they're doing Swift UI versions, things like they've basically done a Swift UI version of navigation controllers and split view controllers, and some of these things are a bit half-baked, like they don't provide the full capabilities, so they're limited, and that's been quite common with Swift UI over the last few years. Each year they've been fleshing the APIs out and providing missing functionality, so that you have the full kind of possibilities. I think the other aspect of it, Bailey, is that if you could see yourself writing apps that work across Apple's platforms, I wouldn't go and learn the individual platforms from scratch if you don't know them. Like go and learn AppKit and go and learn UIKit and go and learn I don't know, WatchKit or whatever it is now. Because I think the future of developing cross-platform stuff is for sure using Swift UI, at least for the graphical parts of it, and maybe, yeah, a mix of things for the rest of the app. And that would be my perspective anyway.
Yeah.
We didn't. No one brought up their favorite feature of messages, being able to edit messages and unsend messages.
Yeah.
User feature. We don't care about it.
I mean, I feel like it's useful for some people. I personally, I'd commit to the things I send. It's too
you
late.
commit?
Yeah. It's gone. It's in the web. I'll send another message if I need to make any changes or, edit anything. But no, I could definitely see how that could very much be useful for people.
Okay.
Yeah.
Your new nickname is No Regrets.
No regrets, yeah.
Yeah.
Just going in deep. But yeah, no, I don't know. Yeah, I feel like being able to edit messages is useful. Delete messages is definitely useful as well. I wonder how they plan to implement that, and like how much can you edit and delete at certain points? Is there history as well?
Right. Is it time limited?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like what's the limitations on this possible system that they're thinking?
Yes, it is interesting because you kind of assume, when some things are, I forgot the word for it is, but where they commit to some changes and you can't go back and edit them, then people often use them for sort of evidential purposes for things, right? Which as soon as you can go back and edit them, you can't, which is, I guess, where you're thinking. Yeah, Jason, and it is. Yeah, that's an interesting question. Mitch has also said in the betas so far, it isn't a backwards compatible feature. So what does that mean exactly, Mitch? I have a beta on my phone, but I'm not using iMessage on it. So what happens? You can make the change on the beta version and they just see the original message and never see the change. Is that what you mean?
They'll see the original message. And I think on the newer updates, like in the later betas, what's happened is it will say, person has updated the message to now say this.
Okay. Which is
Um,
sort of the text-based solution that they've also done for what are they called? Like emoji responses, or those responses
the
icons
reacting,
for exactly for text messaging and
I was
MMS
gonna
that doesn't
s- they
support.
can't allow editing. How are we gonna know about politicians calling each other horrible things if they allow that through messages?
Exactly.
That's right. Or students that send us special consideration and show us screenshots of a message from a particular day.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, this is always the dangerous things with the betas when you get new functionality. I tend not to be signed into my iCloud account on the betas because, you know, I use maybe shared shopping lists and things with my family or shared calendars. And I'm always worried that if I sign in on a beta device and upgrade my calendar or whatever, it will stop syncing and working. So,
Breaks compatibility, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, that yeah, that could be pretty disastrous if, you know, all your calendars or anything else are just completely shot.
Yeah. And look,
Yeah.
to their credit, Apple have done some amazing transitions. Like in the time I've been a Mac user, we've switched from PowerPC to Intel pretty seamlessly with, you know, emulators to, or whatever they call
Rosetta.
translation layers, Rosetta, and then over now to M1 Max. And there was a point update to iOS where they completely changed the file system that was used on iOS. So they have a file system, AFS, that is better than, I can't remember what was used on the previous one. But yeah, they did that migration in a point update for all users, and you know, I'd never heard of anyone having any problem with that, and that's pretty amazing. So they are good at doing some of these transitions quite well. Yeah, what else have we got? They announced that, oh, speaking of Memoji, someone brought up, no, not Memoji, someone brought up Emoji before. You'll now be able to do punctuation and emoji dictation, which is good because I'm pretty sure I've sent plenty of messages that say something like smiley face emoji, and it literally just has the text smiley face emoji. So I think that's a pretty natural thing for someone to try, though I don't know how you solve the problem of people knowing what the names of different emoji are. I guess you just provide a reference to them somewhere. We learn this as part of our conversation. In the future, people will speak emoji to each other in the corridor.
Yeah. That's it. Yeah. I'm sort of curious with all the medical stuff and the run stuff, like the fitness and that, like what kind of information they're now gathering and how easy it would be to access some of that within their app integrations. So like, could you actually quite easily pull that information, you know? So as an example, like Pokemon Go will pull your fitness movement activity and use that to work out whether you hatch an egg in the game. Like, I'm sort of curious about what kind of information they'll pull. Have they sort of announced anything really, or?
That's a good question. I am the wrong person to ask about that. I do not know. I know that HealthKit is where a lot of the health related data lives, including, you know, runs and all kinds of other metrics that are collected. And I know that apps can request access both to read and write to it. And I think that's the standard mechanism, is that an app like Pokemon Go would say, can I get access to these certain things out of your health kit data? But beyond that, I have no experience using it. So I don't know. Don't know if you have any further knowledge, Josh. No.
That's fair. Yeah, it's just sort of, it makes me wonder if they've done a bit of an expansive element to the health kit functionality, being the fitness upgrade and the medication upgrade.
So
That's
Mitch
something.
said HomeKit supporting the Matter standard when it finally comes out is something I look forward to, having a few gadgets. I will admit, I completely ignored the HomeKit stuff. I saw they had a redone app. I mean, I'd looked and opened HomeKit, but I think I own a couple of Airport Expresses, and they're basically the only thing that show up in HomeKit for me. So I have very little experience and so far little interest, though I have thought about trying to get light switches and things in my house that would connect to HomeKit. So Mitch, what gadgets do you have, and what can you say about the Matter standard? Do we know what it's going to give us?
I mean, I can talk to the Matter standard a bit as well. So it's
Okay.
So it's basically a new standard that's being developed by not just Apple, also Amazon, Google, Samsung, and Zigbee.
Sweet. I like this.
Basically, yeah. So it's basically a standard for interoperability between IoT devices in the home. So at the moment, there's a bunch of different technologies. So Zigbee is obviously one. HomeKit, you've got Alexa's got its own. Google has its own. You've obviously got like MQTT for more low-level stuff. The idea of Matter is that all of these different manufacturers would use this one standard that means that it can just be interoperable regardless of what setup you're using. And just looking now, I believe IKEA, Huawei, and Schneider have all also joined as well. And it's open source, even better.
Cool. That would be great, because I mean,
Yeah.
in theory, that means that once that's done, you could imagine being able to control the stuff from a range of different devices and operating systems, and yeah, okay, sounds great.
But also, like, I know that there's so I don't care too much for automated home IoT stuff unless it's stuff that I programmed myself. I feel ancient when I say crap like that. But anyway, I'm distrustful of these things. I'll go make a tinfoil hat if you need me to. But I know that a lot of the like stuff you get from Kmart or the cheaper stuff doesn't necessarily play nice with like Amazon stuff or Google stuff or HomeKit stuff, because they all have slightly different protocols. So not everything is compatible. So you need to be careful when you're actually getting certain devices to make sure that it's compatible with what you've already got, or you'll just end up with multiple different technologies.
And look, I had heard about issues with vulnerabilities in some of these products that didn't have secure protocols or anything, and people showed how easy they could be hacked into and controlled. Seems quite funny, right?
Default SSH passwords for IoT connected devices, making everyone's home surveillance cameras a botnet.
Awesome.
Just, casual little problem.
Yeah. Yeah, Mitch, what devices do you have for HomeKit, and how do you use them now, and how do you think Matter will improve it?
At the moment, mainly just a few lights, but because I drive, I've been looking into getting something that can open the garage door, which is obviously a bit scary, but to expose to the internet. But like if it recognizes that I'm arriving, then I don't need to fumble for the little remote that's probably fallen somewhere into the car.
Yeah.
So that's actually interesting. If you're worried about it being scary, this is just a off-topic sort of thing. It doesn't need to be internet. It could be RFID or something short-range radio on certain frequency, like transmitting a code. We actually had, not for this unit, but there used to be a master's version of this unit, sort of, iOS and IoT. And we actually had someone develop a system like that, where they had an automated garage door opener. Although in their case, I believe it was based on image recognition of the license plate. But you could easily do something with a short range radio, having that connected in the car, outputting a passcode that then is detected by your garage.
I'm just imagining myself walking up to their camera with a hand-drawn license plate.
Yeah, let me in.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, I'm sort of saying that as well. I still remember that pigeon one. Just
The
use
pigeon one?
image detection for pigeons, because they didn't have a garage, so they had their car parked outside, and a pigeon kept pooing on their car, damaging the paintwork. So their assignment was to using image detection to detect a pigeon, to then aim and fire a water pistol at the pigeon, because that is the humane way to scare pigeons away from your property.
Yeah, so they made basically an automated pigeon water sprayer.
Pigeon water spray turret. And that
But
was
it
the
only
assignment.
did to pigeons. So
Love
if
it.
another bird landed, like a native, it wouldn't shoot them.
Yeah,
Yeah.
tower defense for your house. I like it.
Yeah.
This
Super
is
useful.
great.
If you're interested in
Yeah.
these sorts of projects, enroll in MakeLab for semester 2. You should actually make them.
Shameless plug. Excellent.
Yeah.
I'm not even taking the unit this semester,
No,
so
that's
it's not even.
fine.
Yeah, it's Jason's this time.
Yeah. But yeah, still useful.
Still useful. Absolutely.
Yeah. But no, it's cool.
What else do we have on our laundry list? Reminders is going to have reusable lists for like routines and trips and things. Like if you've got a list of things you pack when going overseas or going hiking or camping or something. I might use that
Yes.
if I ever go
Yeah.
hiking again.
Yeah. if it ever happens. Yeah. I guess that'd be useful for like, business trips and that, but I don't know. For me, like if I'm gonna go somewhere else, I'd go somewhere different. So I wouldn't pack the same things every time.
Right. Maybe I
Yeah.
need that, just a reusable list that reminds me to pay for my parking at Monash every morning. Probably what I need.
That could be useful as well.
Please tell me you haven't gotten any more.
I did. I got another one. So I got for the students on the call. This is my, I don't know,
Same.
my weakness, my anti superpower, whatever it is getting parking fines. I've had 4 this year. The third one I got out of by just basically asking very nicely for an official warning, and based on the fact that someone from buildings and properties had put a Facebook post on Workplace about what to do when people were complaining they were getting lots of parking fines. And then the fourth one actually had a plumbing emergency like Friday a week ago, where we had a pipe into our house that was leaking, and I was distracted when I drove in and I was talking to the plumber and I was late for a meeting, and I forgot that morning. So that was my most recent one. And I've now got various things in place, like a reminder on my phone that doesn't always seem to work, and a sticky note that I put on my monitor. So when I go in the morning, I remember.
Yeah. I was
but,
going to say, I've done similar things. I've had
have
2 so far.
Yeah, I have a hope.
And a
that
warning.
And a warning.
Yep.
The initial one, the first one is a warning, yeah. So I have a hope that I'll be able to get out of the one with the plumbing emergency, because that seems like a pretty valid reason for having forgotten.
Yeah, it's an emergency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They actually let me off on the one where where they booked me in between me walking to my car and me getting to my office and putting it in. Because I actually screenshotted all of the time logs compared to the ticket, and they're just like, oh, no, you paid. That's fine. We'll get rid of it.
Do you know what this feels like? It feels like those cartoons where there's like a parking inspector hiding behind a car and they see you walk away and they jump out and they start booking you, kind of thing. Like, yeah.
Oh dear, I just need to remember to do it when I'm actually at the car.
Yeah, exactly. So what else do we have on our laundry list? A couple of things left in the last few minutes. Stage Manager. Did anyone look at Stage Manager for iPad and Ventura? This is like the kind of, it's like multiple desktops, but you get like a little icon that represents the minimized view of the workspace, and it's sort of arrangements of apps. On iPad, it seems to be a bit limited. On the Mac, it seems like it could be any number of apps arranged.
I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Windows has had this feature for ages, and I've never once used it.
Okay, so
my desktop has it. I just don't use it.
I will say I have seen some students use it in class though.
Oh, I've seen people use it as well, and the people that actually make use of it and remember to make use of it, I can imagine it being extremely useful. So Mac having something like that, it's a good feature, even if it's something that I'll never use.
Yeah. I think I'm just stuck in my old ways.
Oh, it's only available for the iPad with M1, Tony says. Okay. That's annoying.
Oh, great. So they're fragmenting it further. Also, I'm just going to harp on my usual thing that I say every year: when Xcode for iPad when. You've got no excuse anymore, Apple.
Oh, come on, Josh, it's basically there. You've got Swift Playgrounds being able to submit apps to the App Store. Did you know that?
Yes, but Yes, I did know that, and I
Yeah.
do know that it has a bit more functionality now. But I'm thinking at it from the perspective of of our teaching.
Sure.
I want to be at the point where you don't necessarily need a MacBook, where you can just code from an iPad and be fine for our unit.
And for the students in the call, this has been Josh's wish item for the last 3-4 years
Yeah.
or something. hasn't
Yeah.
it? It's like, Josh, what's your predictions for WWDC? And it's, I don't know if it's so much a prediction as a
I
wish,
want
but it's
it.
like, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. What is your number
definitely
one
not a
feature you're looking
prediction.
for?
Yeah.
But no, that's what I want, because obviously, it's, if you've got the MacBook, it makes this unit a bit easier to deal with than having to come in to campus to work on the Macs. And anything to make this more accessible for people, I think, is an absolute win, both for the unit but also for iOS programming in general.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally agree. Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, like, I still sort of wonder, why can't they put Xcode on a Windows machine?
Because they don't want to.
I know they don't want to.
I mean, there's
but
two things,
still.
right? There's one thing is, obviously it's a complicated app, and not only the app, it's got a
Yeah.
whole tool chain that's now bundled with
Yeah.
it, including simulators and everything
And
else.
you need.
I mean,
yeah.
we know that they have APIs to make some of their apps work, because we've had iTunes on Mac for ages. We've had iCloud features and one other app. I can't remember what other. Is it Safari? Safari used to have a Windows version. I don't know if it does now.
Yeah. I think it still
It
does.
used to.
Oh, used to does.
So
Mhm.
we know they've done some of the work towards that. Maybe Apple, yeah. But yeah, that's a good question. I mean, that would help our students a lot if they could develop like Android Studio can on Windows too. That would be huge for us.
Yeah.
Probably
And
it
you've
would
got
mean the
other-
university just wouldn't have Mac labs anymore, because I think the university is moving away from having labs.
I
I
don't
think
know.
we're the only ones
Yeah.
using those Mac labs.
Yeah.
We are, although the labs aren't going anywhere anytime soon, because there are still classes that need them.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Um,
wonder if they'd ever do an educational license.
Yeah, I don't know. Guess it's a possibility.
Yeah.
I had one more thing I really wanted to get to, which is
Yeah.
the Mac is getting a clock app. I'm just kidding. It's not a big deal.
I was going to say it didn't already.
Yeah, so this is this thing of like filling in the gaps that Apple do, where at various times I can't remember what the last iOS app they brought to the Mac was. I was just looking at my doc to see if I could figure it out.
Actually, Messages would have been the last from last year when they finally integrated it properly.
No, I think it was something else. It was like, someone might know, Apple TV and podcasts. Yeah, it might have been, wasn't reminders or something like that. There was, I don't know, I'll have a look in the applications folder in a second and remember. But like each year they fill in the gaps and they bring something to iPad that wasn't there, or something to macOS that wasn't there. And the clock app, I think, is coming to iPad and macOS, which probably means it's been rewritten in Swift or Swift UI. So that's kind of was one of the features that was listed on the page that I kind of had a laugh at. I guess what it does mean is you don't have to go to Google to ask what time zone it is somewhere else, and set a timer or do other things that you might want to do on a Mac.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
Or like it's because like reminders, it's like, this is fantastic. I just wish I had it on my Windows machine.
Right.
That's the biggest problem I have. Like, some of these, I'd love to use them, but because I have to work across Windows and Mac, it just limits what I can actually use in terms of the Apple ecosystem.
Yeah, for sure. So I think
There's
Find
a-
My is an app that was recently added to Mac that wasn't there. Home, the Home app, was another one. And there might be like one more that came in the last. Maybe the Stocks app. Yeah, it was the Stocks app, I think, came last year or the year before. And it was like, oh, okay, another iOS app that's now available on the Mac, which I don't think I've ever opened the Stocks app on my computer. But there you go.
I don't think I've ever opened it.
Yeah. And there was, I guess one other or two other little things I'd comment on. One is they've rewritten system settings on the Mac in Swift UI. which I mean, I like the idea of. The particular interface was quite iconically Mac, but it also is quite dated and you know, is not always great. The new one doesn't look great either from the betas, so I'm not so
It
sure
looks very
about.
iOS.
Yeah, it does. It does look very iOS, and I hope it's not limiting. Someone just iPad will finally have the weather app. Yeah, exactly. So there you go. This is exactly what we're talking about. Is the weather app
Yeah.
on? Is the weather app on Mac? No.
No, I think that was one of the things I saw listed.
Yeah, it might
in
be announced as
Ventura.
well, because if it's coming to iPad, almost certainly it'll be on the Mac as well.
Yeah, I was gonna say, was that they saving it for next year's announcement, maybe?
I don't know. And then one of the other things, the very last thing I had on my list was there's an app called Freeform, which looks like Miro, if you know the kind of online whiteboard software, collaborative software Miro. So I imagine it's going to be a sharing based app where you can sketch and add images and, you know, part presentation, part mind mapping sort of software. But it also comes with the caveat that the beta website or something just listed as coming later in the year. So it might be one of these things that isn't in the betas and isn't available till a later point.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if they
That
can
could be
make
interesting.
like if that has a web version that you can use on other platforms, that'd be brilliant.
It would be, and
Yeah.
almost certainly it won't, right? It'll be Apple devices only, and therefore it'll be limited to
Yeah.
in its kind of business use. Because yeah, I agree, Josh. It sounds like a great business app, right? Like if it's done well and the syncing is good, and you know it has good Google apps like features of being able to see what other people are doing.
Yeah,
I think even just being able to like sketch on your iPad or something like that, and then being able to like share it across wherever else.
Right. And that was one of the features of it that was mentioned.
Yeah.
Jason was like sketching on an iPad and having, you know, that writing be just part of it. What were you laughing
Yeah.
at? Did I miss a joke?
no, so it's just I remember for IE last year, we were
Mm.
doing like we had a shared whiteboard.
Yeah.
That everyone was using their computer, and I just had my iPad with me, so I'm like, oh, well, I'll just draw on it, and then I got told off.
Oh, because you weren't
Yeah,
collaborating?
No. It was collaborating. It was on the board, and they just it's just like, why are you writing in pencil? Just use text. And I was like, iPad. I'm actually writing. I've got a stylus,
Exactly.
not a mouse. My handwriting's not that bad.
Mine is.
Yeah, mine's terrible.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, look, we've kind of gone to time and we've discussed everything I want to talk about. Did anyone have any last questions, final thoughts?
I guess I have a final question, which would be, how do you think this year's WWDC compared to last year's?
Well, I'll start. I in terms of announcements and things, I think it was kind of similar. Don't think there's been huge headline features the last couple of years, but there's been exciting incremental improvements and there's been good stuff for developers. The last 2 years now have been the ones that have been online with the pre-prepared videos. And having watched a lot of the WWDC videos prior to that, I will say I think the format of it is great. I think I've never been to WWDC in person, but I've heard of people going and benefiting from the lab sessions. But you can still do that in the online format, and I think the video quality and what you get out of them is very high. I mean, the videos are obviously carefully scripted, well rehearsed. The examples are good. The integration with the developer app where you can get access to the code and find things. I think the videos are a great resource actually for people to learn particular technologies. The only downside is that sometimes the videos are the only resource and there isn't good text documentation for something, and you have to go and watch a session video on something to really understand how you're meant to use it, which I don't think is great. But that's my thought. What about you, Josh?
I mean, I pretty much nailed it. I like the way they've been doing the presentation videos, but the documentation that's a good point. It's lacking. Not as bad as Unreal though. I'll say that iOS has not gotten to that level yet, but I would like to see more on the documentation side of things. Live examples or just example code, I think, is really useful.
I mean, like when the company comes to you asking, oh, your teaching materials, can we use that as documentation?
Don't even get me started.
Is
No.
Unreal? Is that what's happened with Unreal or something?
Kind of, yeah.
Kind of. It's complicated.
Yeah.
Wow.
They basically said, we don't have any C++ tutorials, and you've made some, so. do you
You are
mind
the
if we-
official source of documentation. And
No,
we say, how much will you pay us?
no. TLDR is that we're looking at becoming an affiliate,
Okay.
so a partner with Epic. And part of the reason that we're able to sell it is because we have good written C++ tutorials for our games programming units, which are few and far between.
That's cool. That's a nice accolade for Monash or that course if
Yeah, I just
sort
need
of
to.
recognition that's high quality material that other people then want to use.
Well, that'll be something I'll need to come and speak to you about at some point as well, organising that partnership. But yeah.
Yep. Cool. Did you have any particular thoughts on overall WWDC, Jason, like an answer to your own question?
Yeah, I mean, I guess as an answer to my own question, I feel like I do agree with you in that the presentation quality and everything has been fantastic. They've done a good job. I do agree as well that there's, not much change. I do feel this year was maybe a little bit less compared to last year. And that's probably something that I was actually expecting to be the other way around. I sort of felt like because we're sort of starting to come out of the pandemic now in certain countries and things like that, it was possibly just going to have a little bit more than what it did. So I
Right.
was maybe mildly.
We've talked in the past about having kind of slow years and
Yeah,
like years where it seems like Apple are fixing more things and focusing
Yeah.
less on new features. And you're talking about kind of that being forced upon us, I guess, through COVID and wondering if they were going to ramp it up and we're going to get something
Yeah.
big, right?
come out nice and big and, into 2020, into 2023 kind of thing, but it just didn't happen as much as I was expecting, I guess. That's maybe something that I sort of noticed, but I'm not, I'm not disappointed with what was there. It's just, I was possibly expecting that a little bit more.
Right. So you both do VR stuff from time to time, right? Do you have any kind of predictions or thoughts on? I mean, we've had rumors for a while that Apple will come out with some kind of Google Glass like AR or VR
Yeah.
headset, and like we've seen Facebook do it. We're seeing
I
Google.
Yeah, I think they will. Whether it'll be
It'll be mixed reality.
WWDC or whether it's anything else, yeah, it'd be more likely mixed reality than anything else as well. VR doesn't have. VR's got a lot of problems with it,
Yeah.
Mixed reality, being able to integrate information into the real world using augmented reality, mixed reality sort of style thing is definitely the future and definitely where all that kind of technology is going to go. VR is not going anywhere anytime soon. There's too many problems trying to sort of integrate real world and like
It's
you got to set up a space. You've got to
yeah.
have the power to be able to do an entire VR world and all that kind of stuff. Whereas mixed reality, it's lighter on processing power. You can still move around and not bump into things. You don't need a particular space all the time. And it's got more data that you can use in real world situations. Like, looking at a hotel building and it's showing you all the current, rooms that are available or anything like that.
Yeah. I think Apple, I reckon the rumors have been around for a while. I reckon, I don't even know if it'll wait till WDC. It could very well come out with the September announcements that they do with the new iPhone. But I definitely think it's in the next year or so. And I just hope that it's decent. Look, it's Apple. It probably will be. And honestly, I'm more trustful of them when it comes to security side of things than I am with other companies.
Sure.
But yeah, it's just there has been a bit of a pause in mixed reality. Like we had the first HoloLens come out. We've got the second generation now, which is actually really good. So I've had the opportunity to use one. And then outside of that, there hasn't really been much consumer available. And so if Apple come to the market with that first, then I think that will open up it'll be more back to Apple in its prime, where it's just setting the trends that are happening.
Yeah. See, I
Am I
feel
gonna
like
need to
it's
learn?
easier.
Am I gonna need to learn what the metaverse is?
No,
Oh, good.
we'll burn the
Don't.
metaverse down. No.
Yeah.
I can't ever see Apple utilizing something that Facebook came up with in terms of naming. Sorry, Meta came up with. So
Yeah.
I feel like they'll have their own marketing name for the same thing.
Oh, the metaverse is marketing bullcrap anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, Bailey's comment. I'd love to see more competition for Meta from Apple. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. True. Yeah.
Although we
I
did
still feel
see
like
Google try and create their own social network. That didn't work terribly well.
that went down so fast.
Yeah, but Google does what they always do, which is kind of dip their toe in, make something that's okay, and then just like, oh no, it's not successful, cut it.
Yeah.
Without actually giving it time to grow.
Yeah. I feel like it could have actually gone somewhere.
Google Plus though. So sorry, Google Plus would no, that didn't. And I think
but
yeah, the social media was crap, but there's other stuff that they've just
yeah.
Google Plus grew out of something else before it, didn't it? Wasn't there
I
something
think it
that
did.
Daydream.
Google?
Daydream is actually a good example of that, where Daydream had a
Yeah.
lot of promise and they just cut it.
Yeah.
I miss Google Reader. I still use an
Google
RSS
Buzz.
reader, and it's still I can't remember which feed site I use to back it now, but man, Google Reader. I don't even know what Daydream or Google Buzz is.
Daydream was their virtual reality platform.
Ah, right. Okay. Shows.
Yeah.
And what's Google Buzz? Oh, pre-Google Plus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
Google Buzz. Oh, the irony. I have no idea what it is.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, thanks all. This was fun. Yeah, students, do you have any last questions or anything you wanted to say before we finish up?
Which other units? Well, it depends on what you want to do. So, like I said, like I jokingly said make a lab, but seriously, if you like making things, it's a very hands-on unit. So FIT3178. And you can actually take what you've learned in this unit and then utilize it in that unit as well.
Yeah, for that one, we'd
That's-
probably say more integration of app and physical technology. So
Yeah.
if you built a device that you can control from an app, go for it.
Yeah. You can use pre-existing knowledge and then build a tangible object. We've had people build like automated curtains based on the time of day, controlled by a phone, all that sort of stuff.
Mailboxes and things that notified your phone whenever you got
the
a
mailbox one was amazing.
letter. Yeah.
Yeah. Notify you when you got a letter, and it had text-based recognition, so it took a photo of the letter when it get into the letterbox, and it could tell you who it was addressed to in the house, and it even had functionality to tell you, based on logos on the letter, whether or not it was predicted to be a bill or junk, or just
so you don't have to bother opening it. That's great.
Yeah.
Don't even check. I got junk in the letterbox. We'll get it next time.
So you've got stuff like that. I mean, I don't know. If you're looking at more design stuff, there's always the game design units. Michael, you got any recommendations?
I don't know, Bailey. Do you have particular? I mean, what do you want to end up doing? What are your interests? They may be typing.
And develop.
Okay, well then,
definitely those two units.
Yeah, those two units.
Yeah.
Software in general, there's the Android unit 2081 is an option as well. If you wanted to learn both iOS and Android, there is a unit that uses Flutter, I think, from memory. I can't remember the unit code though. There's one that uses one of the it's Flutter, or it's one of the other ones. It might be oh god, I'm blanking on middleware. I think there is another unit that uses one of the middleware platforms that covers that as well.
Interesting.
81, yeah.
Yeah, 2081 is Android.
Yeah. Yeah. Trying to remember.
So still in Java, I think. So at some point, I hope that's going to switch to using Kotlin.
Yeah.
which is kind of
Yeah.
like the Swift,
Yeah.
analogous to Swift on iOS, replacing Objective-C.
Yeah. I'm so happy for Swift compared to Objective-C. I hated Objective-C.
Yeah, so I actually, for those that don't know, I took this unit as a student when it was Android and iOS, but I did it back when it was Objective-C and Android. So I got a pass in the unit because I did none of the iOS stuff. I only did the Android stuff because I hated Objective-C.
Nice.
And then Swift came out, and it's like,
And
all
then
right,
it
I
came
love
back
this
to
now.
bite you and you had to learn it anyway. And look, Bailey, I think, I mean, also because of my kind of research area and background, I would say that, well, I don't know the unit, there's a data visualization unit, and in general, that those kind of skills are useful. There's a lot of collection of data and analytics and data science going on in industry right now. So having that in your kind of toolbox of skills is a good thing. The other thing is, I have a personal kind of interest and background in software usability, and you see some of that has permeated 3178, and we talk about that. And I think it's kind of integral to app design because of the limitations of the platform. You need to, it's more important that you make careful decisions about UI. But I would say like usability,
3175, yeah.
interface design exactly are good units to take. They're not really don't fit what you're saying in terms of making things and game development, but I think it's
I'd argue they do.
sometimes well, okay, yeah, I mean that's a good point to debate. I think sometimes students can leave our degrees and not have a good appreciation for the audience they're building things for. And I think having that awareness is really valuable in thinking about it. So
Yeah.
that would be my two
User-centric design is
suggestions.
key.
Yeah.
Yeah, hopefully there are some good units anyway for you to look into.
Mm.
Yep. All right, cool. Any other questions? Cool, no worries. Thank you. It's been very fun. So thanks for the questions and in the chat. We do these because we've historically enjoyed doing these little sessions, and it is more fun when we get students that come along and interact with us. So thank you, Tony. Thank you, Bailey. Thank you, Mitch.
Yep. Cheers for that. Very good.
It's great to hear. Thanks, Bailey. Said, I think I've enjoyed this unit the most so far. You're quite welcome. It's always a pleasure. Both, as I said in my final message, seeing what students create, but also interacting with students that appreciate the unit, the way it's set up, and we really try and make it like an entrepreneurship.
I'm gonna have
thing.
to go. Sorry.
That's fine. Cool. Thanks, Josh. All right. Great. Thank you, everyone. Have a good night.
All right. Take care, everyone.
See ya.
Catch you all
Bye.
later. Bye.
And thank you, Jason.